would like to reassure Paul, first of all, that even though we are lawyers, we are not conservative. We like technology and we like engineers, and we believe that we see ourselves at least in a kind of social engineers, and we need to, and I think that we need to complement, to integrate the kind of technical engineers that you are doing with the kind of social engineer, the designing of normative mechanisms that we can do, so that through the integration of the two, social choices can be implemented in the best way. I would like now to get from the floor any questions or requests of clarification. We are we are registering the speeches and we would like then to distribute it through the website of the Alias project. So speakers are invited to have a look at the sheet that is included in the materials they were given, and to hopefully to consent to the presentation being distributed. Thank you very much for that. You mentioned the fact that the lack of a legal, an appropriate legal framework has already been an obstacle in introducing innovation in the aviation area. Can you maybe give us some idea of the kind of problem with which you had to struggle in this kind of context?
Well, it is possibly not as black and white as that, in the sense that there are real problems. I mean, we have obviously had to come to creative interpretation of the current rules, but as I said, there is clear tension between what in a general sense the European integration is trying to achieve with the EU rules on the one hand, and the insistence of the national approach, which is historically coming from ICAO. And you know, this presents sometimes difficulties to us, and we're trying to overcome that. Our sense is that up until now, certainly in ATM, the systems have been mostly national. They are connected up, but they're mostly national. We will see with César, given the system architecture which is underway, we will see that this will change. There will be common elements which will affect all of the countries. And we'll need to see exactly what the effect of that is. Who is going to take responsibility for what in this? And so you see already there that there are a number of issues which we know are there and which are still not quite sorted out. And we're going to need to do that during the deployment phase. They will maintain a number of national installations, for example. But let me give you the example of EGNOS, where we have definitely already a single system in Europe. The question appeared, well, if the system is working everywhere and it is operated at the moment by an organization which is made up of a shareholding arrangement between 7 ANSPs, what happens if the EGNOS service is provided in another country, as it is? What happens in the other countries than the 7? Who will take responsibility for it? In most of the national legislations, it is not foreseen that there are outside systems which provide services. The result is, for example, as we can see today, which is fascinating, that in Spain, they don't allow formally the use of GPS in aircraft. For the very reason that it is not a system which is based in Spain, it is not under Spanish control, and therefore it cannot be used. Now, I don't know what happens in reality. I can hardly imagine that it isn't used. But it is a fascinating a fascinating story, and these are the sort of things where I think where it merits looking into it and saying, well, if we're going to go to CESAR type like systems, which basically are going to absolutely, you know, have all of these systems interconnected, and where the various bits and pieces are going to be is going to be not quite irrelevant from national territory, but there are certainly parts of the system are going to be common in only a few of the countries for the purpose of all of them. It's going to be interesting to see what that is going to be delivering. So the example, as I said, of GPS in Spain, I found intriguing when I found out that this is the case.
I would like to ask you one thing. So the example of GPS, I think, raises an interesting issue in the sense that there may be technologies, now usually at least the public tend to see technologies as a kind of threat, while technologies could also, and I think also in the case of GPS, contribute not only to efficiency but also to security. And as there may be a technology, a responsibility for introducing a malfunctioning technology, we should also consider whether there could be also responsibility on those who fail to introduce those technology which could contribute to security, so that harm happens as technological insufficiency. I think this would be also something that we need to consider on in our project as something to be taken into account when making those kind of choices. What do you think?
Yes, I think this is going to be an interesting element to look at. I think there is going to have to be certain standards to which systems are delivered and functioning, and I think putting those demands on them will provide a balance between the obvious, you know, the financial and political and industrial elements in it, and in the end, the service that they intend to provide. Coming back to GPS, GPS is an interesting case from a liability point of view, because the US government up until now has tried to argue that there is no liability for them. From what I know of it, they do know that they cannot escape liability, but they're trying to minimize it with all the force they have. This hasn't been tested yet. And it is certainly intriguing to see that now it is going to be, or it is already used in the aviation sector to a large extent, what it would mean if there would be a real case. I happened to be sitting once on a plane behind somebody who must have been very responsible for this area, because he was looking at a pack of papers like that on liability of GPS, and I don't think he knew that I saw that. But I've had some discussions with the US colleagues on this, and it is an issue. I mean, this was the discussion I had with Anna, is, you know, if we have Galileo worldwide, well, we can put up a regulation in Europe and handle the liability through that. But if something happens in the US, for example, it will happen under US law, and we will get whatever the judges determine we need to get. And it can be a lot, you know, so. Yeah.
What are the liabilities issues that you see in a GPS system? It's just telling you where to go.
Yes, but if... yeah, sure, but, you know, the situation is, I mean, we looked with Galileo, we looked with the insurance industry at what would worst case scenarios be and what would happen. They came to the conclusion that a sort of worst case scenario would be two planes crashing into each other and then jointly tumbling into a nuclear reactor. Okay? Estimated cost, 5 to 6 billion. So you then get, the first question is, well, what happens in court? Well, nobody knows exactly what is happening in court, but you know, the scenario was, well, for what could the EU then, as owner of the system, be liable? As I said, the estimations were that it could go as high as 5 to 6 billion. Then we looked at...
Sorry, I was going to the technical point of view. GPS is just a recommendation.
No.
That way,
No, the
other systems that would, put the safety in place.
No, GPS is not a recommendation. Basically, GPS tells your receiver, or enables your receiver to determine where you are. Well, the question is, are you at the place that they think they are? Because there are known faults in GPS sometimes, whereby some of the atomic clocks go off, and there are, from one moment to the next, you are in reality, hundreds of meters else than your receiver is telling you where you are. And that, of course, can cause a lot of problems. So the question is, well, who is at fault here? Is it the pilot? Is it the receiver equipment manufacturer? Is it the GPS signal provider? Or what? And this is with all of the technology. The technology is all nice, and 99.9% of the time it works fine, but the 0.1% where it doesn't, this is where you guys can come in. And with more technology, it becomes more complicated, and the systems become extremely large. I mean, CESAR is a gigantic, as a system, a gigantic system. What is going to be interesting for me, for example, is once we're going to connect CESAR up to next-gen in the US, how that is going to work out. Also in the liability sense, what are the US lawyers going to tell us before they allow the connection of the two systems? No idea.